Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for making time to join us on this edition of Spectrum. We are broadcasting live from the central building within our city, Kampala, along Dastool Street. But this radio station is also broadcasting live from its website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. On that website, there's an icon with the word Listen Live. You click on it, and you'll be able to listen to us loud and clear. We're also live on DSTV. Yes, if you have a DSTV connection, look for audio channel 897. Radio 1 is also live on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. You download any of the following: TuneIn, Afro Mobile, Your TV channel, Radio Garden, and Stream Africa. Look for Radio 1 FM 90, and as long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to us. My name is Kenneth, Lukwago, your host. Today I have officials from the National Building Review Board to continue with the discussion about the Beams and Waiters campaign, which is aimed at alerting you, members of the public, on what you need to know to actually avoid challenges within the building subsector. We also have a big screaming headline on the New Vision today, which talks about building permits, districts probed over corruption, as also corruption gone into this business of actually acquiring building permits. I have two officials in studio. Engineer Timothy Mubala, he is the manager in charge of compliance at the National Building Review Board. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Also in studio, Engineer Anthony Rucheche. He is the manager in charge of investigations at the same organization, the National Building Review Board. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth, and good evening, listeners.
Right, let's bring on board a listener who might probably be hearing about the National Building Review Board for the first time. Who are you people, and what is your mandate?
Well, the National Building Review Board was established by the Building Control Act, which was enacted in 2013. National Building Review Board was established in 2018, and the National Building Review Board, its main mandate is to oversee the implementation of the Act, and we could not do the implementation without regulations. So the first task the National Building Review Board did was to establish the regulations, which were released in 2020, and also the National Building Code, which are basically standards, which were also produced in 2019. So those are the four main documents that guide our existence, and we have 5 main mandates. 1 is to monitor building developments. 2 is to oversee, monitor, and inspect the operations of the building committees. These are the committees that are responsible for implementing the Building Control Act at the local authority level. So we oversee, monitor, and inspect the activities. The third mandate is to ensure that buildings to which the public has access have provisions for persons with disabilities. And any public building, like where we are seated here, must have provisions for persons with disabilities, either a lift or an access ramp. And not just to the reception, but to the entire building. And we also always encourage people for their homes as well, to ensure that when they're building their homes, they cater for persons with disabilities, because we also age. You don't want to leave your master bedroom upstairs and switch with the shamba boy who sleeps near the gate just because you did not plan. The other mandate is to hear and determine appeals. If anyone is dissatisfied with a decision of the building committee, or the building committee is dissatisfied with any matter, they refer them to us. Under that same envelope, we also receive a lot of complaints, which are not necessarily appeals, but complaints like whistleblowing. And then we take up such matters to the logical conclusion The other one is to establish building control-related fees. In the past, it wasn't so. Each local authority had their own fees structure, but that was one of the mandates that was given to the National Building Review Board, and that's our main mandate.
All right. The National Building Review Board is running a campaign which is dubbed Wetase. And it's one of the reasons why we're having this discussion today. Engineer Anthony, what exactly is behind this campaign and what do you want to achieve?
Thank you very much, Kenneth. So Wetase campaign is about Ugandans, Kwetasa, loosely speaking. But the idea is that if Ugandans out there have not noticed buildings that are in a precarious state, or they have defects that they are worried about, or they are buildings which are in a state that they are not comfortable living in, or they think their neighbor is putting up a structure that looks dangerous or unsafe, or the people are using materials that, in their opinion, whether the opinion is valid or not, in their opinion, they think the materials are not good enough, then they can reach out to the board. Or if they feel frustrated by the people who should be offering them a service, people that are paid to give them a service. In the newspaper article you talked about, which was published by the New Vision today, you see frustrations of I've applied for this permit and it has taken 3 months and the building committee is not saying anything. And previously, before we had this system in place, we seem to be doing better. So what does a Ugandan do? So the Ugandan should use this opportunity to reach out to the board. We exist because we can look into the inactions or actions of the building committees at the local and urban authorities and help them by way of appeal, by way of reaching out to us. Timothy mentioned that we receive complaints from the public on any and everything matters in the built environment, and once you reach out to us, we'll look into that, both technically and otherwise, and we'll give you guidance. If there is validity in the concern that necessitates us to now engage the inspectors, the building control officers who are closer to the Ugandans in the districts and urban authorities, then we'll do that on your behalf. And we are a public body, so no one is going to ask you for any money. I think it's only the appeal against a decision of the building committee, which the law requires that you file that appeal with 20,000 shillings, which does not come to the board. This is money that goes to URA as filing fee, and there are no other fees involved. For the other complaints, no one is going to ask any Ugandan for money to consider your complaint or look into your inquiry or investigate any issue that is of concern to you. It is important that all of us not only have a safe environment, but we should feel that we actually are safe in the built environment.
All right, now let's look at how you operate as the National Building Review Board. What are your structures? How do you link up to the point that you have presence in districts where maybe delays that you're talking about need to be eliminated on time for people to actually get building permits? Let's look at your structures. How do you operate? How do you deliver on your mandate? Are you only in Kampala, or you have structures that go to the common person, to the person who wants to build at a parish level or at the lowest level possible?
Well, our mandate is countrywide. It's a national mandate. And being a regulator, our activities are slightly different from the operators. And many times we confuse 3 common words that are in the Building Control Act. We have a supervisor, who is, let's say you have a project, you're building a home. The law requires that you get a professional who is going to supervise your project. That professional must be there all the time, okay? Because he's directly responsible to control the quality and everything going on in the site. Now, the local authority, which is also present across the country, across all parishes, they are mandated to inspect. And I think the best example I can use is the school inspectors, inspector of schools. When the inspector comes, they do not teach if they find the English teacher doesn't know English or is not teaching well. They only inspect, take note of what is right, what is wrong, and then charge the professional to bring the
act on their
project to
finding.
compliance. Yes. So that is how our presence is on the ground, because the Building Control Act has the building committees and the building control officers as the foot soldiers. Now, the inspector, the person responsible for inspecting is the building control officer, and the law allows for as many as required assistant building control officers. So the inspector I'm talking about, the person who inspects on behalf of the building committee, is allowed by law to have assistants, as many engineers as possible. And so that's how we work. And then the inspectors report the building committee. The building committee then reports to the National Building Review Board. So our presence on the ground would be necessitated if there is a matter that is either an outlier, or there is a complaint, or, for example, collapse of buildings, where the building committee cannot investigate themselves. In that case, then we are required to go and do the investigation. That said, our structure is still is about 50% at the moment. The approved structure by the Ministry of Public Service is about 100. We're around half the number. So once the structure is complete, we're also going to have regional offices, which will take the services closer. But I must say that even now, we have been able to respond to whatever matter that is that arises across the country. That's how we operate. So the National Building Review Board then reports to the Minister of Works and Transport. And that's basically the structure. The local authorities have building committees. These building committees have all the professionals required for the built environment. And so we shouldn't expect any failure in terms of identifying any issues, building control-related matters or built environment-related matters. They are dealt with at that level. So by the time the National Building Review Board comes in, the building committee has failed. So that is basically how we operate.
And then this brings in the issue of the issues that have emerged with the building committees. First of all, one would want to understand who is in charge of the building committees, and then why are we seeing this outcry where some people are complaining about corruption in these committees. What exactly is going on, Engineer Anthony?
Thank you very much, Kenneth. So like Timothy said, building control is 4 stages. You have the minister, policy, you have NBRB, regulator, you have the building committees, implementation, basically, but the eyes on the ground, the inspectors, are actually the building control officers. So who is responsible for the operation of building committees? So by law, we monitor their activities. So if there is a failure in a certain building committee, the board, NBRB, can then come in to try and address that. But because these are at local authorities, the person responsible for the building committees is the accounting officer. So in the districts will be the COW, for the town councils it will be the town clerk, for the municipalities it will be the municipal clerk, for KCCA it would be the executive director. So that's the person that is responsible for the building committees. And in fact, if there is a jurisdiction where there is no building committee, the person to hold accountable is the accounting officer. And we've engaged them. We've engaged them, taken them through the act, and let them realize that they are negating on their duty if they are not forming these building committees. So the committees do the building control end to end. They receive applications for approvals for plans and approve them. They issue building permits. Under their supervision, they look at inspection reports, and if there are any interventions, they will act on those. Then at the end of the building, they receive applications for the occupation permit and issue the occupation permit, and they have powers. They have powers to order maintenance, to order evacuation for whatever reason, if they think there's a scenario of unsafety. And then, so generally speaking, the implementation of the building control function is with the building committees, who then report to the accounting officer at that local or urban authority. So if they're not doing their work, in the opinion of a Ugandan, an ordinary Ugandan, what should the ordinary Ugandan do? Like I mentioned, the Act and the regulations give any ordinary Ugandan the right to appeal any decision of the building committee. Recently, we've received guidance from the Attorney General that actually silence is also a decision. That if I apply for building permits, the law says within 30 days, the building committee should have given me feedback. If there are no issues, they should issue me a permit. If there are issues, they should communicate those issues so that I rectify them and get a permit. So the complaint, for example, the New Vision, which was saying the person has spent 3 months without receiving his permit, clearly is out of the law. It is illegal. And that Ugandan has powers to appeal. And the appellate body in this case is the NBRB. So you appeal to us, say I apply to this building committee, say Wakiso, I submitted my drawings, I paid all my dues, the credentials of my professionals are there, and no one has queried them. The land title and it is clear, but after 30 days, the building committee simply has not done their duty. We look through that appeal and dispose of it within a maximum of 60 days. That is a legal provision. We are not at liberty to sit back and wait for 3-4 months before we dispose of your appeal. And we'll hold that building committee once we have gone through and discover that indeed they have either ignored or by omission or commission, they've not done their duty, then we'll hold them to account. The problem we have is, I think many Ugandans are reluctant to report, to appeal, because I think this financial year we've handled about 2-3 appeals only. And yet you have an outcry that the building committees are not doing their work, that people have to pay money outside the approved fees, the designated fees. I saw it in the article that you alluded to, page 4 and page 5. And we are saying, please reach out to us. We are paid by the government of Uganda to listen to your appeals and hold these public officers who are paid to do their work to indeed do their work.
Well, I want us to walk the listener through what exactly has been happening, why this is being treated as a corruption matter. Have you been fully able to understand what has been happening in these different building committees that are being implicated? What exactly went wrong? We want the listener to understand so that they can also avoid probably being caught up in this kind of a mess.
We have had complaints coming our way. One of them that I remember was about actually the fees that were being charged. I think he got a permit, and then when he applied for when he notified for commencement of works, then a letter came and said, no, you still have to pay some more money to the local council for you to start. And he said, but I already paid tens of millions of money. How possible? So he wrote to us. And we looked through the complaint and discovered that indeed the assessment that was done by the local council was way higher than the law provides. The fees for building permits and even inspection, which you pay for the first 12 months that are paid concurrently with the application for the permit, are determined by the law per square meter, depending on where you're building, whether it's a city or municipality or a town council or just a district, depending on the class of building. They're clear. So it is not subjective. It's not that the person you find at City Hall is going to sit there and look at you in a court and say 3 million shillings. The fees have been determined by law, and those regulations are there. So Ugandans should not be duped. And that's why we're encouraging them to use the online system, BIMS, the Building Industry Management System, because that system calculates for you your fees, because you will have uploaded your drawings. The location will be known, the class of building will be known, so it can calculate for and tell you that this is the amount of money you need to do and generate for your PRN, which then you use to pay, and that money goes to URA directly. And that removal of the physical interface will help curb these issues. Now, I don't want to say that the Ugandans out there are mudslinging our wonderful officers in local councils, or that the local councils are guilty of asking for bribes. The idea is, if you know that you should be paying 2 million, and the person says, give me 1 million on the side and pay 2 million to URA, don't pay that money. And after 30 days, please come to NBRB and appeal. Trust me, that officer will do his job. Why is it treated as a corruption issue? Because the building committee and the building control officers who advise on technical aspects of the building committee are public servants. They are paid to actually do that work. In fact, if Ugandans are not going to the office with applications, they would be redundant. So they exist because they are supposed to offer that service. And that's what government pays them for. So anyone that asks for over and above that is basically abusing the position or the office that they are in, that they hold in trust on behalf of Ugandans.
Engineer Mubala, this issue seems to be widespread, looking at the way this story was sourced, the reports coming from the different districts. So what remedies have you taken? What action are you taking as the Building Review Board to respond to this outcry?
Thank you, Kenneth. Of course, corruption thrives where there is ignorance. And it is worsened by the use of middlemen. So what we, as NBRB, what we have done is to come up with the system called BIMS. And that system is supposed to minimize physical interface between the different players. We also have the challenge of non-professionals being in practice. So BIMS also helps us because the system is interlinked with other the databases of professionals, the architects, engineers, surveyors, the registered ones. So the system does avoid the practice, minimizes interface. Secondly, it ensures that you have the real players, the registered engineers or registered professionals actually practicing. The other thing we've done is to engage the public generally, to give them information. We've had several barazas. We have engaged the media to teach them about the provisions in the law. And I really like the accuracy of the article in the Vision today because everything is on point. Okay? Like Tony said, I wouldn't want to say that the officers are clean. Neither would I say that these accusations are being overfueled. Because we have real complaints.
And you know the districts where this...
yes, we have had real complaints, and we're going to take it up.
So one would want to know what kind of action is being taken. You know, one of the reasons why corruption thrives is something happens and then nothing happens. Probably at the local level, people are transferred from one district to another and they continue with their practice. They actually innovate on how to actually do it even much better.
So there is this article is a result of this, what I'm talking about, giving information to the public. Because for a long time, this sector has not been regulated. And basically, each local authority handled things their own way. Now, even after the enactment of the law, establishment of the regulations and so on, still the public was largely unaware of what was going on. So we've had several engagements with the public to let them know the provisions of the law, the fees, and is one recent one I received last week where the invoice given to the client was even handwritten, and things like arrangement fees, and which are totally illegal, very exorbitant fees. So the public is getting aware. We're making sure that the public is aware so that we can have this exposed, because we have a mandate to help the government realize its objectives of housing, decent housing. It is very unfortunate when someone's investment comes down just because we have not done our work, or they fail to get a permit and then end up building at night, building over the weekends hurriedly because they are being frustrated in a way. The other thing we have done, we also approached by the developers of petrol stations, and because it was out of our mandate, we did engage the National Physical Planning Board, and they came up with guidelines for fuel stations. That's a story for another day. And like Tony mentioned, that
I don't know where those guidelines are. Because what we seem to be seeing on the ground.
At least there is a guideline. Because before there was nothing. So where we can, we have done something, and where we are, doesn't fall under our mandate, we have engaged the relevant stakeholders. We're glad also that the National Physical Planning Board has now come up with the National Physical Development Plan, and they are now working on the detail per local authority. The other thing that we have done is to engage the accounting officers to let them know. Surprisingly, a big number of them did not know the law.
All right. And
after that engagement, we have had the number of building committees established, raising from 50 to now over 120 building committees.
All right.
So we are getting there.
All right.
So this exposure is because people are now getting aware.
All right.
Yes.
This is Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at the efforts being undertaken by the National Building Review Board to ensure that we have good construction out there. And I am speaking to two officials from that entity, Engineer Timothy Mubala, Manager Compliance, and Engineer Timothy Rukochi, Manager Investigations. When we return, we'll dig more deeper into what they have been able to achieve over the time they came into existence, but we'll also be looking at other issues. You heard Engineer Anthony talking about BIMS, that's the Building Industry Management System. How is it a solution, and how can it help to address the issues that we are talking about? Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are looking at the efforts being undertaken by the National Building Review Board to address a number of issues that continue to emerge in the building subsector. I'm speaking to Engineer Timothy Mubala, Manager Compliance, Engineer Anthony Luchoshe, Manager Investigations, and my name is Kenneth Lukwago, your host. Now, earlier on during the discussion, gentlemen, you hinted on the building industry management system as a solution to some of the challenges we are seeing in the construction industry, including the accidents. Anthony, can you please explain more? How does it work so that members of the public can understand how useful this system can be to them?
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth. So BIMS, the Building Industry Management System, basically digitizes building control. Before BIMS, you would walk to KCCA, submit your drawings, and stamped structural certificate of structural integrity and the land title, search, and so on, and then wait through the process. And then they would call you, or you'd send a broker to help you follow up until you get your permits. So now that had its issues around the bits of inefficiency and what goes on top of the queue, and also time. Why do I have to walk to City Hall to ask what the progress is with my application? Why can't I sit home and wait for my permit? So BIMS digitizes the entire process, and the entire process. So right from application, that if I want a building permit, I can just log into BIMS website, open an account, put in my drawings, put in my application, tell them who my engineer is. Timothy mentioned that BIMS is integrated with other databases of professionals, the land information system. So you don't even need to go to the land office and get a search document, because the land title, once I query the land information system, they should tell me that this title indeed belongs to Timothy Mubala. So there's no point of you having to go and wait for another 5 days to wait for a search letter to come and confirm that indeed this title is yours. If you claim that Anthony is your structural engineer, it queries Engineers Registration Board and says, Anthony, someone claims here that these drawings were done by you. Is it true or not? And then you will send back and say, yes, I'm the engineer or not. So it transforms the entire building control in a digital form. So you can apply for your permits, you can apply for your inspections, you notify the local council of your commencement of works, you apply for an occupation permit, all online from the comfort of your home. The idea is that to remove the physical interface, that the developer, the ordinary Ugandan who is struggling every day to look for the money to construct, does not have to walk into City Hall. How is it helping? Of course, should make processes more efficient. But two, in our experience from the building accidents that we have investigated over the years, for building collapses, which we are glad have actually drastically reduced, and we think that we played our bit in ensuring that that number comes down. Our top two causes of building accidents have been faulty or no design. Ugandans are building based on guesswork. Even when they have drawings stamped and KCCA or Wakiso or Kira gives them a permit to construct, once they start constructing, they find someone on Kampala Road who tells them how he has been constructing for 20 years and gives them billions of money on pure guesswork. So faulty or no design or variations during construction, which points two things. So the top two are no design or faulty design. The second one is unsafe practices during construction. And those point to two absences. The absence of professionals in design, which we are going to cure using BIMs, and the absence of professionals during construction supervision. It makes no sense for you to have a proper design when it is not supervised. Because the person that you're using to construct, if he doesn't understand your design, you've wasted money in design. Again, if you have a very good engineer in the supervision and the design was nothing, then you have the same issues. So BIMS ensures that at least on those 2 points, it checks them. Your application for a permit will not proceed if an engineer has not confirmed that he indeed has been engaged by you at those stages.
So if construction goes on without,
without
all those requirements that you're talking about, what happens?
Thank you. The law, again, we are glad that at least we have a reference point. The Building Control Act makes that an offense, that you cannot construct without a building permit. So constructing without a building permit is an offense, and the law tells us the liabilities when you do that. The second offense is actually constructing without a supervisor. Previously, before the Building Control Act, the responsibility on the safety of construction was in the developer. If central building came down, God forbid, they would look for the owner of central building. And say, central building, you are reckless, you did not do the right thing, maybe you did not maintain the structure, and we are arresting you and charging you. Now, with the Building Control Act coming into play, this responsibility has shifted to the professional. Because the developer, most times, is not an engineer. He does not understand how these things work. He has the money, he's an investor, he wants to put up a structure. So the law now just requires him to engage a professional. So get an engineer and hand over and say, this is my dream, realize it in a safe manner. So when we have a building that has an issue, we do not look for the developer. The only question we ask the developer is, who is your engineer? We go for the engineer. Because fortunately, the engineer is regulated. Engineers Registration Board has given me a stamp with a number and has presented me to the public and said, Anthony Ruchuche understands what he's doing.
Well, you'll be looking
So when I fail, yes, Kenneth.
You'll be looking for the engineer or engineer?
The engineer.
The engineer.
So the law...
I don't know if you understand what
I do. The law makes it illegal to use an engineer. And I want to ask the public out there, please do not be tempted to use engineers who maybe know as little about construction as yourself. If you want to use an engineer, you would rather build yourself, because both are illegalities and both of you will make the same mistakes. So please engage a registered professional engineer and let us hold him accountable for his commissions and omissions if he doesn't do his duty. Because if he fails in his duty, we'll go back to ERB, Engineers Registration Board, and tell them that this engineer who you presented to the country as being legitimate and knowing what he's doing has failed in his duty of care. Please recall him.
All right.
From the Ugandan market.
Now, Timothy, all these requirements that Engineer Anthony is actually putting across, they are for which particular types of buildings? any, even a residential, or is it commercial? There are upscale buildings. What kind of buildings are we looking at?
Well, the Building Control Act classifies buildings into 3 categories. We have Class A. These are complex buildings, which are above 12 meters. They are for the public. Even if it doesn't exceed 12 meters, but as long as it's a public structure, that's the Class A. They're complex ones.
12 meters going up.
Yes.
All right.
Now, Class A is not only about height. Height is one of the indicators, but as long as it is for public use, like your building here, this is a Class A building. Because
Even if it's less than 12 meters.
Yes, because it's for public. Then we have the Class B, which that's where most of the residentials really fall. And then we have the Class C, which is about 30 square meters or less. And that is basically 5 meters by 6 meters. A small structure. Simple kiosks, builders' sheds, market sheds. That is Class C. And for those ones, the requirement is not much, but someone must certify that the essentials are taken care of. For example, power supply, and the building control officer, the developer, when they're asking for approval of such, all they need is a simple sketch. I want to build maybe a temporary shed where workers will have their lunch, and this is how it is going to be. This is how I intend to supply power, and then at that level, it is approved and inspected by the building control officer. Now, when it comes to Class B, Class A, the level of complexity and requirements keep going up, and that's where we need the professionals who are going to be involved in the supervision. Many times we consider buildings to be very basic, elements. That's a matter of steel, concrete, and that is it. But there is a very scientific process to the way you mix the concrete, the way you cure it, and achieve the life of the building. And I think one of the worst things that has ever happened in this country is the so-called wheelbarrow, because the mix ratios are totally out of range, and everyone thinks he's a concrete expert. So a building is supposed to last 50, even up to 100 years. And that can only be achieved if you mix it properly, if you control the quality of the materials. Right, sometimes people think sand is sand, but sand can also have impurities.
And I was going to
so
ask
we
you.
have to make the professionals must be involved if you're going to have your building achieve its service life. Sand has impurities that must be gotten rid of. The water that you are using, the aggregates, the stones, and then the quality of the cement. And above all, maintaining the quality that was designed. Because the designer will tell you, some people think you can put concrete of any grade anywhere. But certain areas require higher grades of concrete, the walkways, the basements, the columns. And then when it comes to partitioning walls, things change. So it's a very scientific process. It's not a matter of just constructing. So where we need the professionals is really Class B and A. And the requirements as you go to Class A are even increased. We need things like the traffic impact assessment. You remember what happened to one of the properties, I think Oasis Mall? When it got so busy, you remember what happened at roundabout? Because probably someone missed on the traffic impact assessment. And I'm glad that the local authority took charge and lowered the business there, and now there is more sanity. So the traffic impact assessment must be done. We're looking at environmental impact assessment. All these are requirements that must be taken care of as you increase on the complexity of the building.
All right.
If it is near a wetland, then the environmental is also going to be very instrumental. So we need all the built environment professionals as we increase on the complexity of the structure.
Right, and I was about to ask you, when you look at the buildings that are collapsed these days, and even the quality of buildings compared to those that were built a long time ago, you might find a building like here that we are in, the central building, which is one of the historical buildings in Kampala, having a longer life than these new buildings that are being constructed these days. And yet technology has evolved over time, which means building materials should be better. We have more skilled engineers. And what could be going wrong?
Thank you, Kenneth. I think, yes, we have more engineers than we had that time. And we hope that the skilling level is also matching up with the times. Our concern is that these engineers, for whatever reason, are not being engaged to do the work. Take a walk through where you stay, the building sites that are there, and see the highest qualification of the people who are in charge of this construction. For some reason, some Ugandans are trusting the engineers, the ones you talked about, rather than the people who actually understand this work. And we want to tell Ugandans that this is science. We have a problem in this country where everyone believes they are concrete experts. Nkokoto, budgeting.
And we are talking about skilling,
yes,
where people are being trained at even the lowest level.
And these are things
some
that
of this
Timothy
construction
was
work.
talking about. That concrete, it is not that me as an engineer who has been practicing for 16 years, I will come to your site and say, now mix it like this. Because the aggregates on your site, Kenneth, are different from Timothy's aggregates. The cement that I'm buying at 30,000 shillings, which Ugandans know as cement, is different from the cement I'm buying at 45,000 shillings because the strength is different. Now, you need someone who understands that and tells you what to do. The other baffling thing is someone is willing to invest 2 billion shillings in a structure, but does not want to spend 5 million shillings to test the soils. So he's placing 2 billion shillings purely on the assumption that the soil is strong enough. Chance. Luck. I don't know whether it is prayer or it is the mercy of God that is helping us. And you want to look at this developer and say, how much is 5 million shillings as a proportion of your 2 billion investment? Do a proper job. Please do not put up your investment in an area without doing a geotechnical investigation. To, of course, it may be 10 million shillings, depending on the class of the structure and extent, especially in Kampala. We know the soils in Kampala are terrible, that if you had a medium range earthquake, for example, your soils would actually flow. They would liquefy, and the geotechnical engineers will confirm that.
All right.
But we have increasing cases where developers are trusting people that know as little as the developers themselves with their construction. And not only is that illegal, but it is actually a very serious issue. Kenneth, lastly, safety is important to us. We've carried out an investigation into about 150 building incidents. In the last 52 months, 108 Ugandans have died in a building-related incident, which, in my opinion as an engineer, are preventable.
All right.
That is 2 Ugandans every month. And an equal number has gotten very seriously injured. And these are preventable injuries. These are preventable deaths.
All right.
So let everyone think about safety and make it a priority.
Right, we have comments coming in from the listeners, and very quickly, we begin with Drani, who says, Radio 1, could those gentlemen come clear about the specific costs per square meter charged in a city, municipality, and the town council? Because this lack of information is where the corrupt are freely swimming. Make the respective costs explicitly clear, please. Then we have another comment. This is Okoth Charles from Tororo. Please, what's the difference between engineer and engineer from a layman's understanding? What does traffic have to do with buildings? That's a comment there from another listener. Then we have another one from David. Who is the supervisor in this case? Is it my engineer who is constructing the building? If I'm building using an approved plan, is it my responsibility to inform the local authority that I have started construction? What if the local authority never turned up until my building is ready? Is it a crime on my side? That's a comment from David. Then Irene writes in and says, what is their take about mushrooming petrol stations closer to each other in most parts of Kampala and neighboring towns? Then we have another comment here. Are building committees in the districts well facilitated? Because if they are not, this could be the reason why we have a manifestation of corruption. Then we have another comment, permits for what type of buildings? Can you explain more? I think that's what you explained earlier on, giving us the grades, the types of buildings. Then we have another comment. Kenneth, thank you for the show. What are the security assessment requirements in a Class A and Class B structures? And how are assessments required for such buildings? Well, those are some of the comments that are coming in. We are running out of time very quickly, if we can respond to them.
Okay. Kenneth, if Timothy want to start?
Okay.
Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth. Security requirements, the law is very clear. For example, security normally goes together with safety. If it is a public structure, required to have cameras. You're required to have
CCTV cameras.
Yes.
Okay.
You're required to have smoke detectors or fire alarms. You're required to have sufficient fire emergency exits. You're required to have a certain number of exits, given the number of people. For example, when you're sizing a mall, depending on the number of people who are expected to be there, the building code dictates the number of exits and how they should also be installed. The emergency exits or exit doors must swing in the direction of exit.
Okay.
We have had, from our investigation, we found that students have died trying to get out. Certain buildings, class of buildings should not have burglar proofing. We've also found that a number of children have ended up dying
Stuck
at
in
the
hostels.
burglar proofed area. The absence of BCOs, if you construct and you complete and the building committee or the building control officer have not come to inspect, as long as you notified them, then you have no case. But the law requires that you engage a professional who will supervise on your behalf. The mushrooming petrol stations, this is a matter that is under the jurisdiction of the National Physical Planning Board, and we're working together as built environment professionals, as a team of built environment professionals to try and address this. You might have seen in the news last week, we are moving out to address this as a team. Why is traffic impact assessment necessary? How does traffic affect a building? On the contrary, it is the building affects the traffic. We have high-rise buildings coming up. We did monitor buildings here in Kampala, targeting those that have basements. And you remember, basements are meant for parking, for vehicles that serve that building. Now, out of the 500 buildings we checked, only 3% are using their basements for parking. So the buildings attract people who have cars, which then affects the traffic. So why the traffic impact assessment is important is basically to address that. And I gave the example of Oasis Mall. If you're going to introduce a building, like we now have the NSSF building, which is over 26 floors on Lumumba Avenue, once that building is occupied, what is going to happen? Okay? Because everyone arrives at 8, people leave at 5. That's why we need the traffic impact assessment. The same with environmental impact assessment. If a building is going to be erected near a swamp or a lake, we know that the tendency for affecting the environment is high, and that's why we need that. Kenneth, I want to address a little on why the buildings that were constructed in the past seem to be stronger.
Very quickly.
Because I think we missed out on that. The answer is in professionalism.
Okay.
Because the professionals were involved then in ensuring that they follow proper mix ratios. Even today, there are a number of buildings that are compliant. And when you check, the reason is there is a presence of professionals. Actually, out of 10,000 buildings that we monitored, only 7% had the involvement of professionals, implying that the 93% we have no guarantee that they are safe.
All right.
Because professionals are not involved.
Very quickly, you have a final word.
I think
Engineer
three questions which were not answered. In 1 minute, I would just... The cost per square meter. Listen, there is a publication called the Building Control Fees Regulations, I think 2020. If you go to our website, nbrb.go.ug, you can download it for free, and that clearly spells out how much money you should pay per square meter, where, and depending on which building. It's about 4 or 5 pages only. So please download it and don't pay any money over and above that. Due to time, I may not go through it, but please find that on our website. Engineer, a professional engineer by definition is an engineer that has been authorized or added to the register of engineers, which is run and kept and maintained by the Engineers Registration Board. To a layman, he must have a stamp from the Engineers Registration Board with his name, his specialty, and his number. So if he doesn't have that, then he's not a registered engineer. Any other person that is placing himself in front of you as an engineer can be categorized as an engineer, because he's not allowed by law to practice professionally independently in Uganda. You don't want people to say, I am chasing all the engineering graduates out there. Commencement notification necessary? Yes, because the building operations must be inspected. So your duty as a developer is just to notify your local authority like KCA that I'm going to start constructing. And the law says 14 days. I think that's the minimum period. All right. That I am going to construct. Whether they come or not, for you, you've done your duty. Permits and what type and assessment? Again, I will refer you to building control regulations. But yes, Class A, which is the highest, you need a development permission, of course, from physical planning, land ownership, building plans, boundary operating report, geotechnical, EIA, traffic assessment. Right. Now for B and C, the requirements reduce because of the scale of construction.
All right.
My final comment?
Yes, please.
Kenneth, let listeners make use of NBRB.
All right.
We exist to help you to ensure that we have a safe
I must thank
built
you,
environment.
Engineer Thomas Mubala, Manager Compliance, National Building Review Board, Engineer Anthony Richeshe, Manager Investigation, National Building Review Board. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for sharing your views with us. You helped us to shape the discussion here in studio. Do join me tomorrow, same time, but we will be doing 2 hours of Spectrum Extra analysis of the key events of the week. Do make a date with me. But up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB.